got a COVID-19 update?
Yes, first of all, I just can't thank staff enough for the hard work they put into a response from the district at so many different levels for what we've been going through. And tonight is basically the beginning of a culmination of that learning piece that we've not really addressed directly until tonight. With the second cancellation of school until April 30th, which is in a sense May 4th, the state of Iowa has asked us to declare by Friday what our plan for educating students is. And there are three choices. The first one really isn't a choice, but if you choose not to educate your students, then you will be making those missed hours or days up whenever school resumes back in session. That is not an option for us. We are not choosing that option. We are choosing the option of voluntary education at this point, with our goal being that by May 1st, we can be ready for some level of credit program at some grade levels when that time rolls around. We can change our plan anytime we'd like. So we're going to talk about what the voluntary looks like tonight. As we ratchet this up this week, it will be ready for implementation on August 13th, next Monday. So,
August 13th.
Or April 13th, next Monday. So on the phone tonight we have Susan Pesanowski and Heidi Venom, who have worked closely with our learning operations team to come up with the details about what this looks like. Our first challenge has been just getting our devices in the hands of children. When we left for spring break, laptops were in buildings, in lockers, and so our first thing is, how do we get that done this week? We've been working very closely with public health on a plan to make that happen, and we're in a good place to do that in the next couple of days. The other challenge was to figure out again what content looks like for children when you offer learning but not necessarily required learning, and how do you support students who don't have devices, so sort of a plugged in and an unplugged in version of that. And I'm going to turn it over to Susan to give you a brief summary of how that's going to work, and then we'll open it up to questions from the board. Susan?
Okay, well, I'll give you a summary of how the week's going to work, and that might help to know where we're going with this. So today, we have prepared our communication going forward and a timeline for the work that our staff is going to be engaged in. On Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday of this week, they will have an opportunity to engage in professional learning around how to prepare content that we can link through Google Doc and to a website that we have prepared that once it goes live will allow parents to access content. In addition, we have sent out a survey to families to better understand where they are in relationship to the technology that they have. And we have also realized, of course, that we need to provide both unplugged and digital content. So as teachers are preparing that content, they're going to be thinking about both through digital and non-digital content. Throughout the week, once teachers have had an opportunity to participate in their learning, they're going to be meeting with their team similar to what they experience in a data team, and they will be asked to prepare one task per week per content area. So if I'm a family, I have a first grade student, I might receive one task in literacy, one task in math, one task for science, social studies, physical education, and social emotional learning. We have asked that those tasks are kept to reasonable levels so that families are not, we don't want to stress our families out and have them, they've just got enough to think about right now. And so we've created guidance for our teachers. So if I'm a PK4 student, the time on task for me to complete a task would be no more than 20 minutes. If I'm a high school student, my time to complete a task will be no more than 45 minutes. But I will have all week to complete that task in that content area. They will not be coming out daily, they will be coming out weekly. to allow families to work through their schedules and meet their needs as best they can. In addition, we will be working with building principals, and building principals will work with their teachers on establishing virtual office hours so families can connect with teachers, or students can connect with teachers and know that they're going to be there at a given time. And we will also be setting up our website that will go live next Monday for families, and then it will also go live in the staff portal for teachers, because we have created a one-stop shop, if you will, for teacher resources, so teachers don't have to go looking all over the place for them, and we will continue to grow that as our needs grow. I think we want to continue our focus on the health and safety of our teachers and our families, and continue to be very, very sensitive to the stress that this type of situation is creating for all of us. So we feel like the learning team has done an excellent job. I can't give enough credit to our building principals and Heidi Benham that has been part of this team with me. They've just been outstanding in putting all of this together.
Thank you, Susan.
Any questions from the board?
I just wanted to make a statement. Number one, it's a little off topic, but I'm going to bring it back around. I want to thank the board for approving to pay the staff while we are closed down. I think that's very important for the families and for our teachers, our staff, our paraprofessionals. We care about them, and we know that they would rather be in class and here working with our students than at home. But I want to commend the board for that. The next I want to do is thank the board also for meeting this way, to be able to lead by example. I know that it's been a little difficult with feedback and everything, but to be able to still do the business of the school and yet do it correctly by what our governor has asked us to do, and the Saragordo Department of Public Health. I also want to thank the staff who's volunteering their time to make sure that meals are handed out to our students that might not otherwise have a meal for the day, and that they've done a really good job. And thank you, Susan, for putting this together with Heidi very quickly. We had, just the day she came out and told us there was no letters to the school earlier of what her plans were, and her, I mean the governor, and what she was doing for us. So thank you for putting this together very quickly and giving us a plan that teachers have, that families will have, and yet at the same time being in mind that a lot of those families are under a lot of stress right now, either not able to work or stressed out that they are working on the front lines in a medical care and worrying about what they're bringing home to their families. So thank you very much, and we commend you for the job well done.
Thank you.
And I would like to add, if I could, right there, I'd also like to thank staff, and I get emotional when I think about this, but our number one concern was nutrition for people. And today the Hawkeye Harvest Food Bank opened, and the people that volunteered there were our employees. So not only are we feeding our children and our families, we are helping out this community in droves. Our staff has done such a wonderful job bringing this together. I do have a question for you, Susan.
Sure.
For clarification, I always need a little modeling. As far as this goes, let's say I have a first grader and I have a fourth grader, okay? Do they get one assignment a week, or how is that? Is it reading and math?
Yes, it would be by content area. So if I have a fourth grader, they're going to get literacy, math, science, social studies over the course of a week.
Okay.
And they would get one task for each of those. Then we're also want to be sure to include our physical education, our fine arts,
Yep.
and then social emotional learning.
Right. And I do know that you guys have talked, I'm sure, as far as the committee goes, how stressful that can be for certain families, and how I'm kind of curious on how, and I know this is all evolving, but how this will be recorded. Like, for instance, are people going to be required to hand this in and get it graded, or are you guys not there yet? Because it's such a huge thing.
With voluntary educational opportunities, we do not take attendance. we do not grade. I mean, those are part of the Department of
Right.
Education's requirements. And so what we would like to see our teachers do is provide feedback to students as appropriate.
Right, okay, good. I was just wondering, because I know a lot of community people are asking me questions, and I said, I know they'll do the right thing, so.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Is there any other discussion, questions?
This is Director Schweitzer. How will the, and I try to always look at it as I'm a parent, how is the district going to communicate with me on distributing these assignments? How will I receive them? Do I go pick them up? Are we doing it via mail? Or maybe that's a different part of the conversation or a different part of the presentation later on. But I think it's good that definitely like the idea of keeping it small and manageable, and then we can always build from there. So just getting them into a new routine. But my question is then how is that, how am I going to receive it, or how do I get it? And then if there is stuff maybe later to turn in, how do I turn it in, or is that addressed later? Thank you.
Right now, what we're doing is setting up the website. So it's set up through Google, which the staff and our families and our students are familiar with. And so if it's online digital content, then it more than likely will go through the Google Classroom format. As far as our lower elementary, we're looking at a paper, pencil type of content, and we'll be working with building principals on what is the best way to provide feedback on that, because it may vary by building. So that's a piece that we're still working through, and we've been meeting daily, so that'll be an answer we'll be working on and working through.
And Jake, more specifically, I'll be doing a video message to our parents and students this week for dissemination, and then we will send out another text message, email message to check your email, where all of these directions on where to find content and how to access content will be spelled out.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have a child that is, or a family that does not have internet, then they would more than likely do the paper and pencil, so that
Yes.
everybody would be included in one program, on one process of the program or another.
Yes, and that's why we got some survey information that we sent out last Friday, and we're going to connect with families that we didn't hear from as well to see what their standing might be. So we make sure, to the best of our ability, to reach out to everybody.
Good job. Anything else?
Any other questions about our response and where we're at educationally?
This is Director Schweitzer. I know there was some conversation about, and some parents inquiring about getting their kids' stuff out of the locker room. And just to reiterate that parents are not to go to the schools at this time to pick up any gear, but and whatever else they might have, or just personal property that they might have at the school. Any thoughts on that, or maybe include that with when you're sending that information out, that we're not just quite there yet? I don't believe that we are, but and when that might happen, and it might be middle of summer or beginning of next school year. But if you had any thoughts or anything to add on that.
The building principals have discussed that question, and we have not communicated that to families as of yet, as you suggested. But that is an issue that we will resolve in the next week, because we do have to communicate that message. But our main goal is for our families to stay healthy, and so that's going to guide whatever decision is made.
Yes. Any other comments, questions? If not,
I just wanted to add that piece of it, that our nurses have worked really closely closely with public health and determined like things in the locker right now are not essential items. And so we are, suggesting they not be passed out right now, just focusing on the Chromebooks.
Ready to move on to the next one? Is it you or Tom doing that?
We'll turn it over to Tom and talk about the pay plan.
When we last met to discuss the pay plan, there was a general consensus to look at some sort of unified pay schedule for the miscellaneous non-exempt employees. And so what you see right now is it integrates all of our non-bargain, non-exempt miscellaneous employees into one schedule. It also includes starting wages for hourly bargain employees so that it allows us to review for internal equity as well as providing a means should any of those bargaining units decertify. You might recall a couple of years ago the secretary's unit decertified. And so as a result, we ended up having to make them miscellaneous non-exempt employees. And so it does allow us to look at that information. So it establishes a starting pay for each position as a percentage of hourly teacher pay without the TSS money, and then establishes steps at the beginning of the second, third, fourth, 5th, 10th, 15th, and 20th year. So that is the plan that we devised for our non-bargaining, non-exempt miscellaneous employees. There was some comment when we included consideration for behavioral interventionists with a bachelor's degree. And so they became a separate pay grade, their pay grade number 8. And the requirement is that the bachelor's degree must be in a related field per the job description. And then it also notes that for the lead behavioral interventionist, that rate is $2 per hour more than pay grade 8, step H for that particular position. And then we also note that the high school administrative assistant office manager is also the substitute coordinator and receives a stipend for that particular position. Any questions about what we put together for that unified pay plan?
Hey, Tom, this is Director Schweitzer. The food service manager, is that Sarah?
No, we have 3 food service managers in the district who oversee the kitchens.
Okay.
And those are hourly positions outside the collective bargaining unit.
So how far, from step A, the starting pay, how far are we today, like right now without a pay plan? Where are we at on that base pay? What are we starting, like a bus aide at? I mean,
We're starting them at $12.65 an hour. The starting pay is reflective of where we are at today.
okay. And that wouldn't remain the same, it would just be a stair step as you go through the year, the step in the year? Is that what you're saying to me on this paper?
Each year, step A would change on the basis of what happens to the generator base pay for teachers as a percentage of their hourly pay. And so that base pay would go up, as would then each of the steps.
As with each of the steps, okay.
Yep,
So then they would be, everybody would be based off what the teacher's salary is.
correct. Yeah, off of the generator base pay without TSS.
Is that much simpler also to keep track of, and does it, in watching it as the years go, to make sure that we're still in the correct pay grade for these types of positions compared to other schools, as well as watching the pay line with the teachers and correlation? Is that easier to map out if we do it this way?
Yeah, I would say that it is too. And you know, these particular positions, we're going to look at how we stack up locally rather than on a statewide basis, because our pool of applicants for these particular positions is going to be more on a local basis than it's going to be on a statewide basis. And so it will allow us to be able to kind of gauge what those low ends and top ends are for those particular positions.
Anybody else have any comments? Okay, Tom, I think you're on to the next page.
Okay, so we're on to the director plan. And you've already seen table A before, which we obtained comparable data from the Iowa Association of School Boards. I think we talked about last time the limitations on that information, particularly as it pertains to the Director of Special Education and Student Services and the Curriculum Coordinator. We don't know what the duties of those positions are among our comparables. They may look completely different from what we have. And in addition, our comparables may have like an assistant superintendent performing some of the duties that we expect those two positions to perform. And so it's difficult to make a real apples to apples comparison of those two particular positions. So for devising this plan, we looked at the base pay being the midpoint of the starting pay for a level 2 building administrator off of the building principal pay plan that was adopted last year. And that midpoint is $100,526.16. And that was based off of sort of an average of the comparable averages and medians, and that's about where it put us. And then there are factors for the educational level for the positions, endorsements and certifications, and then relevant experience either inside or outside of the district. Then there's also a discretionary factor for the superintendent to use if we find that we're behind where we should be, or if there needs to be some discretionary there to entice someone to leave their current job, because we would compete on a statewide basis for these particular positions. The board asked that we put together ranges for these positions. And so the low starting pay is based on the job descriptions, the minimum requirements for those positions related to education level, the minimum endorsements or certifications required, minimum experience required. And that's how we came up with the total minimum factor, multiplied that by the base pay, the 100,526.16, and that established the low starting salary for those 4 positions. To determine the high starting salary, or what the high end of that range would be, that includes the maximum education level possible, the maximum factor that's allowed for endorsements or certifications, the maximum experience that's allowed, as well as the superintendent's discretion. And so the maximum factor that you can get is 0.33. And so that establishes the high starting salary for each of those positions.
Okay, so when I look at this, that base pay starting right out at 6 figures, and in every single one of these positions, if I'm not mistaken, that base pay is not including that the school is paying for their full benefit package. That's part of their contract. So they're really, if you add in that base pay of their contracts of the insurance being paid for, if they're on family plan or single plan, it really ups that by another, what, $9,000–$10,000?
That's correct. This is salary only, the same basis on which the principal pay was approved. And so when you look at these positions.
But the principals don't have their benefits paid for.
I'm sorry, what?
They do.
They do,
They do also?
yes.
Oh, that's just, I don't know.
And that's fairly typical for our comparable group and other school districts across the state.
But when we see that base pay, we're not seeing that benefit added in there, so.
No, we are looking at salary only to keep it on the same level as the building principals when we reviewed that.
Are you done, Jody, or Director
Yes,
Grayson?
I'm just
Or-
processing. But
Okay,
you
sure.
can-
While you're processing, some of the things I thought of was rather than eliminate. I don't want to say eliminate, but maybe incorporate some of the educational level, such as a bachelor's. I probably everybody that's going to be a qualified applicant is already going to have a bachelor's. So I don't know that we need an additional 4% wage increase because they have a bachelor's, or the certifications that may be required already to be a finance director. We don't need to add another 3% on top of their base for their on top of their base pay with these certifications, and maybe just incorporate them as part of that's part of the base pay, and that's what makes you a qualified candidate, and that's why we chose you for this position, is because you have these additional certifications. That allows that opportunity for them to apply. But to give them up to another 9% pay increase for some certifications, I don't know that would be required. Or maybe shift that over to the discretionary part on the superintendent's part to be able to lure them, but to have that as, because you have a bachelor's or you have a certified HR management certification, that would give you another 3% or.
So when I look at that, so kind of what if I can kind of reiterate what I think you're saying so I understand it, Director Schweitzer, is if in the base pay should be all the requirements of the job. So if when you post that, you're saying the qualifications are you must have an SBO, or you must have a bachelor's degree, or you must have, an AA degree, that required minimum education level, those processes should not be added into the base pay. It's if you have something above and beyond that required qualification to get the job. Is that what you're saying?
I think you said it better than I did. Yes, that's kind of what that was my kind of my thought process, and that's what I was kind of thinking. Thank you for saying that a little bit better than I did. Thank you.
I think you said it fine, I just had to make sure I got it. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying then is when we're calculating the low starting salary, we would not include the required, we would not require we would not include a factor for the required minimum educational level. And we would not include a factor for required minimum endorsement or certification. Is that correct?
That would be if it's required, such as a position that if you did not have this level of certification, you could not operate as like a CFO. That would be contingent upon your employment to have that. You shouldn't get an additional bump maybe on top of your already 100,000 six-figure salary because you have something that's required for you to even apply for the position. And I don't know if the job description says that you have to have a bachelor's degree for some of these cabinet level positions, but I'm going to venture to say that they all have that to get to where they are. So if we need to just adjust the base 4% higher and not say that to have a bachelor's degree is going to give you an additional 4%, I don't know if that or split the difference or it eliminated altogether. I'm just having the conversation, I guess, just bringing it out for discussion.
Well, the thing that I'm looking at is the top, your table A. So your comparable range, and I know I'm comparing apples to oranges here because you did different factors, so. But your low range up there for each job is significantly different than your base pay or your low starting salary between these two. And so when we're doing this factor, I don't want to price us out of the fair market value. And so when I see, the comparable range, curriculum director, 66, 120, average 102, and it's very different. The high is 133, low is 116. That's very different than that comparable range of low, high, average, and then the median. And so I just don't want to outprice the fair market value on doing a calculated process, which I like your calculated process, but we can't outprice the fair market value of those positions. We just can't.
And again, we don't know what the responsibilities of those comparable positions are.
Can I ask a question? I'm just wondering, because I'm not this calculating person. I'm wondering, as far as, I'm looking at endorsements, like if you have a director of special ed, they obviously would have a master's, maybe even a PhD behind that. And then also like endorsements underneath that, like our Heidi, who is our director of special ed, she has special ed, but then she also has special programs. And does that take different endorsements? Same with the curriculum instructor. Like, for instance, they might be the curriculum coordinator, but my understanding is she's also the preschool director. Am I right on that?
It may not necessarily require a separate endorsement, but my guess is there may not be other curriculum coordinators out there that are also serving as the preschool director in other districts, or there may be. That's not information that we're privy to, but it doesn't necessarily require an additional endorsement for her to be able to do that.
Right. I just know the city has had a director of preschool programs. They have had the director of special ed. Those were separate. They were just separate. So I'm just wondering if that's how you're thinking too. I don't know.
Well, I think that's good feedback on our, again, plan here. This is just the calculation of it all, so I think we will take this back and make some adjustments to you, and again, it's not what you're gonna do until you apply it to our current people, once we get to that point in the process of determining wages for 2020-21 school year.
Can I just ask one more question? And I'm not
Just
nitpicking.
make sure identify yourself for those that are watching and listening.
Thank you. Director Kaler here, and here's my question. Because you mentioned the health insurance and how that is all paid for. And the principals last year, the board of last year approved that the principals would have all their insurance paid for. Now, down the road, I'm just wondering if that avenue continues, like would they always have it paid for? I'm just wondering about that too. Because insurance is a tricky thing for a lot of people, and it's hard. And so I'm just wondering how that works.
Well, I think that right now, I mean, is why we're doing this, because that's part of the benefit package. If it is right now part of their benefit package, that has to be considered in that base pay, because it's not an expense to them, as it's an expense to other staff. And so it is, yeah, I mean, other people have a wage and then it expensed out their premiums for their insurance. We have a
Right.
wage and then we are also paying for that as a benefit package. So if we're gonna continue to do that has to be taken in when I'm looking at these comparables, low, high, average, and median. I'd have to go back and dig out my papers, but I don't think we were very far over the median when we did this for the principals, and to bring them up, we found we were actually way lower in the process of Tom doing this data, that we still, when he did it, we were just bringing them up to the bare median salary of around the state and then geographical. When I look at it this time for these positions, and from table A to the pay ranges, we're surpassing the median, and our base pay is pretty close to the high and over the average range. So I don't know what happened in those decimals. I know he applied the same thing in the same process, but it's just not, we're not coming up to median and getting our people up to that median pay around the state. We're surpassing it in this model for these positions, and I don't know why.
I'll just reiterate, I think part of the why is these are really poor comparables.
Okay.
Because it's different jobs in different districts and they use the same title. So whereas a high school principal is a high school principal, a curriculum coordinator is not a curriculum coordinator in the districts that we compare ourselves to. So that's the really hard part in these categories of jobs, is knowing that you're talking about the same job. The other example was Katie's example. In the districts we compare ourselves to, the director of special ed is just the director of special ed, not special programs, not preschool programs, not all of these other parts of the job that don't necessarily take an extra requirement, but they're just the way we've ramped those jobs together with duties. There's more than just one job in that position. So that makes this part hard. The other part about the insurance, as we talked about last time, is that all of these plans, when we talk about base pay, again, administrators across this state get full family insurance. All the schools in our comparable group get full family insurance. So to want to add that in and then compare that to what people's base pay is not correct. You'd have to add everybody's insurance in to base pay as a total package and then compare. So we're just using base pay because everybody has different insurance levels that cost different amounts, but the common denominator is that administrators in the other districts get full family. So we've taken that off of the comparison and just talked about salary. But if you wanted to compare total package to total package, then we could calculate in what people's insurance benefit is plus base salary and see where our folks line up.
The other concern is, to remove insurance would, potentially put us at a competitive disadvantage, not only in hiring principals, but also for these positions too.
This is Director Seaton. So, one of the things we run into with the titles that we use is that, which is a fair point, is that you guys indicate that the titles don't represent necessarily what the individual is doing here. So one of the ways to address that is to see whether or not there may be a more effective title to fit the individuals, and then is there a more appropriate, comparable position in other school districts? If there's not, then maybe we're just doing things a little bit differently. But I mean, it comes up every time we talk about it. So I mean, that's one of the things to consider is our curriculum coordinator and assistant truly more of an assistant superintendent? Is that the position, or because this is where semantics do matter a little bit, because then we make these comparisons, and if it's apples to oranges, then when we look at the numbers, they don't look right. But maybe if we were comparing to a more accurate, position in other settings, we'd have a better idea of where we stood.
And the data comes from the BEDS data that gets filed into the state. And so everyone gets coded as one thing or another. And what we code as a particular position may not be what another district does. And so I understand what you're saying, Director Seaton. It is, if we called that position an assistant superintendent, then should it be an assistant superintendent? Well, that might result in us having to pay that position even more.
Right, and the alternative way to address that, again, this is Director Seaton, is to say there's the curriculum coordinator part, and then there's added responsibilities, and do you contract separately for those added responsibilities? Because then you can address. I mean, this is the way I would see it, at least. Then you could say, well, this is the curriculum coordinator, and then there's this other piece, and the reimbursement is partially to address this other piece that's not covered, but it's getting completed by the person in that role of curriculum coordinator. I mean, just in terms of taking out the, if we did something like that, at least we could say, well, this piece of it is the same for everybody, and that's what the reimbursement is for that piece. That's just a thought. It's not anything that has to happen. But I mean, we have this conversation every time this comes up, and it starts to be kind of repetitive, even though it's only probably been once or twice a year. That means 8 times I've heard about it.
Any further questions or comments as we will make some changes to this as you, again, move through the negotiation season and we get closer to determining wages for these particular people next year, that this will be something we'll ask you to consider to use.
Dave, did you want to bring up just getting a little direction from the board with regards to pay for staff between the 13th of April and April 30th?
I'm not following you.
To amend memorandums of understanding with the unions and making provisions for employee pay while we're still closed.
Why don't you just say what you're asking them to do, because I'm not following.
Okay, all right. This isn't this doesn't have to do with the pay plan, but my question is, back on the 16th of March, you gave Dave and me very clear direction to pay the staff, pay our hourly employees and our teachers for the canceled days from March 16th through April 10th. Is that what you are thinking again? If so, I'll get to work on additional memorandums of understandings with those 3 bargaining units, as well as amending the resolution that you passed tonight, so that we can implement that direction.
Well, I think it's really clear that we got money for this school year at the beginning of the year and in the middle, how it goes, that they give it out in September and is it March or April? And so that's already been budgeted. And so I'm really tight with the dollars, but this has already been budgeted. And so why not pay them is my feelings, is what I'm sharing with the boards. We're not saving money by not paying them. It's already been budgeted. It keeps their insurance in place. We're not losing money because we budgeted for it 1.5 years ago. And we've already received our dollars from the state. And if we're not going to use those dollars on salaries and taking care of our staff, then we need to send it back to the taxpayer. That's just my opinion.
This is Director Schweitzer. I would be in favor of continuing to pay them through the end of the month. If we didn't and you started to do layoffs, would there be an implication to do we pay unemployment insurance as a district?
We do.
We do.
We do. Now, if the layoffs were due to COVID-19, right now the state and the feds are picking that up, not us.
Okay, and all right.
But, if we are going to expect our teachers to work as far as putting lessons together for our students, we're going to ask parents to assist students in having them do those assignments. We have food service employees that are continuing to come in and prepare lunches. Then I think if there's an expectation there that they're working some or all of their regular hours, it makes the most sense just to pay them than to try to separate that out.
Yep. Did you have anything, Director?
Yeah, I agree with what both Director Schweitzer and Director Draper, or President Draper have said.
Yeah, and I agree with paying them also, definitely. And you think about it, can't say for money, but think of all the times that we are not paying subs on a daily basis. That's a huge, right there, a huge savings there, when you think about that. Because we are not paying for subs every day.
Well, we will prepare those documents again to extend that pay as long as the closure continues then for the April 20th meeting.
Right.
And because I'm a director on the Sierra Gorda Public Health Board, and I work at Mesa City Clinic. In all honesty, I think we need to prepare for further than April 30th. And
Agreed.
And it's not a meeting for tonight, I'm just discussing since we're talking about it. And then what are we gonna do for our seniors? They do have a graduation that they should get to participate in. How do we do that? It may be later, July, June, I don't know. And a prom. This is their senior year and it's a little different, so I think we need to think outside the box. And how can we get them those life accomplishments? I mean, it was a big deal for me as a mom to have my kids walk across that stage and get that diploma that they've earned. And so I for sure want us to focus on to do something for graduation when we are able to for the seniors, but I don't know, prom is a big deal too for seniors.
Rest assured, our high school administrators are working on those particular issues and we'll have answers when answers can be available.
Thanks, Dave. I know you guys have just done a tremendous job. You really have. Nobody has gone through this before. Not one administrator, not one superintendent, not one board member. I think the last pandemic was 1917, 1918. So we're all learning as we're processing and going through this. And it's things we haven't had to think about before, or what timeline you should be doing it in, or when should you be thinking about it. And so you're learning as you go, and I will tell you, you've done an amazing job in that process. I think the board members have done a really good job to just be the board and let you process your policies and work it out with your staff and how that would look, and laying it out to the community. So I really appreciate that. I also know that you received, you meaning Dave Vierstag, received a major accommodation from Brian Heft, the Director of Public Health, that said you were very, what's the word I'm looking for, engaged in the process right away, listening to the data and the facts, and that you actually, before anybody else had around in the area, a lot of the other schools coming back from spring break were going to go to class. You took the meetings very, I don't know that personal is the right word, but put the correct weight on them with the data that Sarasota Public Health had put out, and agreed to close down at least for 1 week after spring break and take it week by week. But as the data came out, then we have changed it to until the 10th, and then again to the month. But Sarasota Public Health and the other community members that I've sat with in board meetings have nothing but high praise for you, and what an amazing job you have done in communicating with them and being part of their meetings, and then taking the data and putting it back into the classroom area as best you can with your teachers and educators, as then you prepare to give comments to the public. So I know it may seem to our public that it has taken a while, but it was a lot of stuff you were putting together to make sure we did it right, and to make sure that we're doing it correctly going forward. Because again, I don't think you've ever maneuvered through one of these before. And you've done a really good job, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are we all done with discussions?
Well, yeah, you can't follow that speech with anything other than a motion to adjourn.
Well, I did mean every word of it, because I don't give out praise very often. I'm pretty stingy with it. He's done a great job. I think the board has as well. Is there a second to adjourn?
I'll second it. This is Director Kaler. I'll second it.
Schweitzer and Kaler have done a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.